I guess the question you should be asking yourself is, am I violating that principle? And should I, instead of copy and pasting these steps that are going to mean I'm going to have to maintain the same thing in 2 different places or more, should I instead sort of turn it into the Power Automate equivalent of a function, which is a child float?
G'day team, Adam Cogan here from SSW TV, and today we're talking Power Automate flows, and we're going to have a look at a few and critique them. And for that, we have our resident Power Platform developer, Calum. How are you, Calum?
I'm good, thanks, Adam.
Awesome. So this should be good because most developers are very familiar with critiquing other people's code, but when you're in the Power Flows story, it's a little different, right?
Right.
Okay, but he's expert at complaining all the time, and I am sure that when he looks at this one, he's going to find something wrong. So we're starting off with a little automation, and for those that don't understand the power of why you do this when you can code it up, Power Automate is excellent at connecting things together. So if you have a scenario where you're monitoring an inbox and you're looking for emails that have, say, a subject of invoice, and you want to parse that, grab the PDF, throw it into a SharePoint document library, and also connect to, say, a Xero API and plonk an invoice in, all based on this email. That's fairly straightforward, right?
Sure, I'll have it done for you by lunch.
By lunch. Today?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Okay. So a solution like that, connecting a few things up, you wouldn't have to do any code, would you?
No.
No. But if you had to write that without Power Automate, a story like that, there's a lot of code in that connecting to different systems.
Right.
However, some of these Power Automate flows can become long and unwieldy, and Calum is very good at spotting if it's clean or it needs refactoring. So let's jump in and we'll have a look at these 3. This is the SSW coding challenge, and it's been automated. So actually for many years, we just found out the person's name and their email address, sent them a couple of appointments for meeting up, and when they started, we'd create a repository, send them another email. Mm-hmm. We'd ask them to send us an email back after they knew what they were doing.
Yep.
And it would have a diagram, so an attachment.
Yep.
And then we'd reply straight away with the actual one that they're meant to build, just so that nobody was out of sync and everybody was building the right solution.
Right.
That whole process has been automated, and you're going to have a look. So, happy with all this?
Yeah, fairly happy. A couple of things on the naming convention. So you'll notice here we've got a sort of a consistent prefix of SSW coding challenge.
Good.
That's a really good practice, because if you've got a solution with dozens of flows that sort of do different things, putting it in the name like that is a really easy way to sort of group the different sets of flows apart from each other. One thing I would have a think about is the actual names after the prefix. So for example, the first one just says appointments, right? So at a glance, you can't really tell what that does. I mean, I assume from the context of your explanation just now that it creates appointments.
Yes.
But I would really love to be able to tell at a glance that it does that without having to assume. So even if it just said create appointments instead of just appointments, that would be a much better name.
Wow. Okay. It creates appointments, sends emails. Blah, blah.
Sure, I'm sure it does all sorts of things. We'll have a look at it in a minute. One other thing is, you'll notice it's currently ordered in alphabetical order. So one other thing is, I assume these 3 steps are actually 3 steps of a process that happen one after the other, right? So I'm not sure if they're currently in the right order. Maybe it's just coincidence that they're named A, C, and M, but a really good way to sort of enforce that order without having to creatively name them is to just use numbers 1, 2, 3, or whatever to put them in the order after the prefix.
So to be clear, I wonder if they left out the create, so it did order correctly.
Yeah, but possibly.
So at the beginning of this, you would have put 0, 1 SSW, 0, 2 SSW, 0, 3 SSW.
Not quite. I think I would rather have it after the prefix.
Okay.
The reason why is once you've got a view with many different groups in the same view, you would need to somehow remember what number you're up to between the different solutions, which is obviously not really a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't expect so much feedback on the names, but let's just jump into the first one, appointments. Okay. Here we have the appointments. Are you happy with that?
Okay. So at first glance, I can see we're using the description field, which is good practice, so you can tell at a glance what it does. This description might be a little bit verbose. We could probably distill it down a little bit so you don't have to read a whole paragraph. But I do like the way that we've got a link to an Azure DevOps wiki.
And I already have that ready, so we'll have a look at that in a sec. Anything else?
Yep. Other things on this page that I can see that I like. The connection references, you'll notice in the top right section there, all of these connections are using a shared account. So it says SSW Coding Challenge.
So you were looking that there was no name?
Correct.
And you'll notice there's no name here as well?
Indeed. So the owner of the flow is also a shared account. And obviously that's important because if that was a specific person and then that person left the company and their account was disabled, the flow would no longer work.
Got it. Now, why didn't you look at whether this is running successfully or not first?
Because you hadn't scrolled down yet. I was about to. So yes, it's good to see that we've got some green down there.
Yep.
Successful runs, that's all good.
What about this? 1 hour, 18 minutes.
Well, it certainly sounds like a long time, but it isn't necessarily 1 hour and 18 minutes of processing time. So it's quite valid in Power Automate to wait for something to occur. So since we're dealing with appointments in this one, it may well send out an appointment and wait for them to approve it or whatever. So it's probably just time spent waiting. But to confirm, we would have a look at it and find out what it actually does.
Okay, all right, let's move on. I want to see if you're impressed by our documentation.
Okay.
So there's documentation for each one of these. Okay, happy with that?
Yep. This looks cool. So I assume the guys sort of mapped out what they want the process to do first with these diagrams, and once everyone sort of agreed, they went ahead and implemented it in the flow.
Correct. Now, you might want to check out the DevOps, I hope, to see what's going on there, and you will see on the home page, we're not actually doing anything here.
Right.
So in this, there's the pipelines are empty.
Yep.
Because it's in the shared project.
Yeah, correct.
So
we've got a sort of a shared DevOps process, as you can see here. Mm-hmm. So the one pipeline deals with all of the solutions. Yes. And when we run the pipeline, we tell it which solution we want to deploy.
Correct. Are you happy with all of that?
I'm happy.
All right, let's move on. And let's have a look at that first flow and what you think of this.
Okay. So a couple of pieces of feedback off the bat. First thing, I can see that we're initializing a heap of variables.
Yes, 4 of them. Actually,
well, no, there's more as you scroll down. So usually there's a time and a place for variables. I mean, we haven't looked through everything we do with these variables, but rarely I think you would have a use for so many variables. Creating so many variables, it sort of obfuscates what the data actually is. Because when you want to use these variables somewhere, it'll just say the variable, but it won't say where the variable value actually came from, right? So once you put a variable in place and set a value on it, you can no longer see what the source of that variable is. So you then have to make sure you name the variable very clearly so that you know where the data is actually coming from. And unless you're using that many times, it probably makes sense just to refer to the original data source rather than having to make sure you name it properly.
Okay, so I think you're saying you have a problem with how many and their names. What would you call the first one?
I guess if I had to use the variable, I'd just call it appointment time. There's no need for the var prefix.
You don't like Hungarian notation?
No, it's just noise.
Okay, so you just say initialize appointment time. Fine. All right. Let's scroll down, see if you have any other complaints.
Yep. So one other thing that I'm noticing as we scroll down is we've actually overwritten the default step name. Each of these steps has, which is good. It's good practice to put a description of what the step does in the step name. so you can tell at a glance what it's doing. But what I always try to do is when you create a new step, it actually has a default step name. So I always keep that in place and then do dash and then the explanation of what it does. And the reason why I do that is because otherwise at a glance, you can't actually always tell what the step is doing, because all you've got to tell you is that little icon, and those icons are shared between many different steps, right?
So what do you want this called?
I believe this one is an apply to each. So it should be called apply to each dash and then whatever this value is here. So just hover over that value. Get coding challenge settings. So apply to each dash coding challenge settings would be the name I'd give it.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. Let's scroll down. Do you want me to explode this out?
Yes, please.
Do you want them all exploded out? Do you want
Yes.
everyone?
If I'm looking through and seeing what it does, it's easy to forget that there's often potentially many steps buried inside these sort of parent steps.
All right, another one. I think I've done, that's everything. All right, let's start from the top then. All right, so you've commented about the variables. You've got this one you've commented about.
Yeah, now one thing I noticed here is we're looping through coding challenge values, which doesn't quite sound right. So just scroll up for a second for me and expand that get coding challenge settings and show advanced options.
Yep. What are you looking for?
Right, so I can see here, we're actually just getting the top one.
Yes.
The top one coding challenge setting that obviously matches that query.
Yes.
So what's going to happen there is Power Automate is going to return an array
Yes.
with only one item in it. And that array is never going to have anything other than one.
Correct.
Or it could have 0 if there's some sort of error. So what we're doing here when we do the apply to each is it's basically like writing a for loop on an array that only has one element.
Right. Okay, got it. So
what you can do to get around that is you can actually just use a compose step, and there's a function that you can use called first, and you just run that function on the array, and that'll return obviously the first element in the array, and then from then on you can just refer to that result, and that way what you'll be able to do is take all these steps that were buried that you had to explode so much to reveal, and sort of surface them up on the top level.
Excellent. Okay, so we don't need to have a loop if we've only got one.
Yep.
Makes sense. Okay, let's fly down here. Do you spot anything else? All right.
Yeah, not really. I think the rest of it, there's nothing too
Does
egregious
lots of
in there.
things here, pinging people on Teams. Yeah, it's very cool. Or lots of automation.
You can imagine how much work you'd have to put into coding this, right?
Yes, awesome. So I think that's great feedback. Are you ready to give us some feedback on the second one now?
Absolutely.
This is creating the GitHub repository.
Right, let's have a look.
Let's see what you think. So here we have this one. I can already guess you're looking at the names and you're happy that that's
correct.
No
They're all shared
name.
accounts.
This one's shared too.
Yep.
Anything else? I guess you want to see if these are working. They're working.
Yep, I can see some success.
This one's a little faster, 26 seconds.
It is.
So, happy?
I'm happy.
All right, let's go and have a look at this particular flow. So I'll press edit and we'll jump over here.
Yep.
Here we have it. So we are getting some details from a Microsoft form and doing some other stuff. Do you want this exploded out like you did before?
Yes, please.
All right, I'll do that. And I wish we had a button at the top that says explode it all out.
That would be a good feature, yes. I agree.
So I will have that. Do you want these exploded out too?
Yes, please. Okay. Good eye. Those are indeed scope steps, which need exploding as well.
That needs explaining as well.
Exploding and explaining, yes.
Right, okay. So one of the things that you will often find developers complain about that are doing flows is it gets really long. And then they're saying, look, there's so much stuff there. I could get that amount of stuff and put that in a Azure function and just call that, and that'll be a lot neater. But before you jump that far over, you can make one of these guys.
Correct.
And you combine it. You can even move it into its own flow. and reuse that. So let's start from the top, see what you spot. I'm going to go down.
Yep, we've got many variables which may not be necessary, and the naming convention as well. I would probably try and make more consistent with what I explained before. Yep, keep going. Yeah, okay. So here we've got our scope step like we mentioned. So I did actually say before this was the first step. So other things you can do when you've got a piece of functionality that is being reused, just hit those 3 ellipses in the top right. So you'll see there's an action to copy to your clipboard, which is in preview. So that is a cool little feature. What it does is it lets you basically copy and paste flow steps. And if you copy this scope that's got these 3 child actions, it'll actually copy all of those as well.
Is that violating the dry principle? Don't repeat yourself?
Almost. Obviously, if you just copy it, that's fine. Once you paste it, that's a violation.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
But yeah, so if you are using this copy and paste functionality, I guess the question you should be asking yourself is, am I violating that principle? And should I, instead of copy and pasting these steps that are going to mean I'm going to have to maintain the same thing in 2 different places or more, should I instead sort of turn it into the Power Automate equivalent of a function, which is a child flow? So what you can do is just create a flow that just has those steps in it. You can define the inputs and the outputs, and then you can call that flow from this spot in the parent flow. And then in any other parent flow you've got, you can call the same child flow as well.
Right. But you're not suggesting in this case, because we don't know if this is used many times.
Correct, I'm not.
It's since we've looked at most of it, we can assume it's not.
Yep, and like you touched on before, we've got some error handling here.
Yes.
So if you just hit these 3 ellipses and click Configure Run After. So what this is telling you here is that this scope step is only going to run under the condition that the previous step has failed or is skipped, not successful. So basically, it's catching an exception. If something has gone wrong with the first one, then do these actions. So that's how you would do sort of error handling inside of Flow. So that's good to see.
Awesome. Okay, and anything else?
We've got some more error handling there, which is cool. And you can see there, if there's no error, we notify the candidate. I assume if there is an error, then it sends a notification to the developer that they need to fix it up.
And sets off an alarm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. So that's done. Let's talk about the final one. You ready for the final one?
I'm ready.
I'm hoping there's even less feedback. All right. So the name, these names are good.
Tick.
Yep.
Tick. Looks good. We've got success.
Oh wow, the speed is.
That's blazing fast, isn't it?
All right. So let's jump into the actual flow.
Yep.
And I am ready to expand this out for you. Is there anything else? There's another one. And I am ready for your feedback now. Let's go to the top.
Okay. Yep, that looks fine. I mean, obviously the same feedback that I gave for the last 2 apply here as well. Keep scrolling. Just here is one piece of feedback I've got. See where it says outputs there? You need to sort of mouse over it to see mockups pending count. So this is actually a good place to use a variable. The reason why is this mockups pending count has been created with a compose action, and the compose action just gives you an output. Whereas if you use a variable, it actually says the variable name when you use it in a condition like this. So instead of saying outputs is greater than 0, and then having to mouse over it to find out what the output is, it would just say the variable name. So what I would probably do there is create a variable called mockup pending count, set it to the same value as that compose, and then when I use it here, I can tell at a glance what it's doing.
Oh, okay. So in this case, you want an extra variable.
Yes. This is a good time to use a variable.
Okay. All right. So the opposite advice.
Yep.
Okay, let's look down here. And I think we're at the end. There we go. That's it.
That's why this one was fast.
All right. So there you go. We've done a nice little audit of a few flows. You've got a little bit of feedback. You see how one person critiques another person's work. Hopefully that was useful for you. It was for me. Thank you, Calum. That was
Thanks
awesome.
for having me.
If you want to know more, we have plenty of rules on the SSW site. In the area of Power Automate, we have this great rule that you might want to look at of why Power Automate is awesome, with how it connects to lots of stuff without any code, but also what to do when it gets a bit hairy. These things get even hairier than what you've just seen here. We just looked at a couple of simple ones that actually completely automate someone's job. So there's a lot of work that does, and it took away pretty much a full-time person's job doing all that stuff. But there are times that handwriting it in Azure Functions or an API is a better way, and we just talk about that on the rule. So enjoy that. If you have any other feedback on Power Automate or the critique we've done, throw it down there in the comments. We love to learn as well. This is Adam Cogan signing off for SSW TV.